Okay guys, in this video I want to talk about the biggest mistakes that people are making when they are learning JavaScript and people that are learning React, for example. Because if you keep doing these mistakes, you'll never become a developer, honestly. Or if you'll become like a handicapped developer, and you'll have to do a lot of like catch up during your job, and your first job is gonna be extremely stressful. So I want to uncover those mistakes so you can actually be a solid developer. Okay, so the first problem that I see is that people are not keeping their code simple. Okay, there are a few principles in like writing software, and this applies to JavaScript, to React, to anything really. And the first one is to keep your code simple. Okay, what do I mean by that? Like, for example, you might have a lot of like weird variable names. Your variable names do not make any sense, and then what you do is, for example, you put a lot of comments to hide, like under the rug, the mess that you've just created. Okay, so yeah, a lot of people say, hey, put comments because it's good to let other people know what your code is supposed to be doing. But what if you write your code in such a way where people do not need comments and they can just follow your code and understand it? Okay, when I review, like, let's say people's code in my program, my clients, my students, I literally skim it and I run the code in my head. So if at a certain point I cannot understand what's happening in there, that means they did not write their code simple enough. Maybe if you are like coding by yourself, you might be thinking, hey, my code is good because I understand it. And yes, you can understand it now because you've just made it, but will you be able to understand it next month, 6 months from now? Practice makes perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect. Because if you keep creating like code that is complex and very difficult to follow, you'll soon reach bottlenecks. For example, you are trying to create an application, a to-do app, right? This is like one of the apps that my students are building. And if you are writing code that's extremely like hard to follow, you'll start to have a lot of bugs. And if you have a lot of bugs, then it's gonna be extremely difficult to finish the app, and you'll give up and you'll think, oh, I'm not good enough yet. Let me go and watch more tutorials. But the problem there was the fact that your code is way too complex and it's not simple. There is no like specific code that's bad. Good code can be bad in a specific situation, and bad code can be good in other situations. Okay, so instead of showing you like specific, hey, this code is bad or this code is bad or whatever, what I want you to understand is the framework that I'm using. Okay, so I'm gonna leave this link to this GitHub repo that I'm using to create like a naming convention. And I have seen this kind of cheat sheet being used in multiple companies over the years. And these naming conventions are gonna make your code way more readable. Okay, so I'm gonna leave the link for this cheat sheet in the description of this video, but let's just go through it just to have an idea. Okay, so for example, we have here like bad namings, like primer nombre or amigos. I think this is Spanish, but I want to say that I think you should keep your code in English, even though English is not your main language, because I mean, all the methods in JavaScript are in English and all the keywords are in English. So let's keep programming in English, if that makes sense. Okay, for example, here we have page count with an underscore, like it's Python code, and then we have camel case. Okay, so here is snake case, and then here it's camel case. That's bad. You want to have the same casing in every part of your code. Here this is good because we have camel case and camel case, and this is also good because it's snake case and snake case. So in an ideal world, not in an ideal world, like you should have all your code with the same casing. Okay, so if you like snake case for some reason, maybe you come from Python, keep writing your code in snake case, but do not combine it with camel case. What I would recommend you to do is to keep writing your code in camel case, because that's the de facto casing of JavaScript. Okay, so let's see. A is paginatable. It doesn't even sound like English. Should paginate ties. You see, it's even more difficult to read. You have to keep your code easy to read. You have to make it sound almost like English. This is like super important. For example, this is good. Post count 5. Has pagination. Sick. Should paginate. Awesome. So this would be used, for example, if you want to show some numbers at the bottom of the screen to go to the next page, if that makes sense. On item click. This contraction here doesn't make any sense. Just keep it long. Alright? No problem. This one, handle menu item click versus handle click. Here you are repeating the name of this class. There is no reason to repeat that because you are talking about itself anyway. Let's see. Is enabled item count bigger than 3. So this variable is good, but it doesn't fit with this context because you are saying disabled is equal to is not enabled. So why not make this variable is disabled, so you are counting all the items that are less or equal than 3, you know. Let's see. Anyway, you can go through this whole thing by yourself, and what I would say is that whenever you finish writing your code for your application, just go through this checklist and see if your code matches the good things. If it matches any of the bad things, make sure you change it, and I'm sure this is gonna be a game changer for you. Actually, let's apply this framework that I just showed you to real code so you can see how it works. Okay, so this is an app built by one of my students. I'm not gonna look at the functionality right now because I don't care about it, but I'm just gonna edit some of the parts of this application just to see like how you can improve your code just by renaming variables. Okay, so again, this is process. It's being done by me while I'm reviewing people's code, and that makes them better. Okay, but you have to do it yourself anyway. You have to teach yourself to do it anyway, because otherwise all your work colleagues will absolutely hate you if you give them like bad code. Okay, so let me explain how it works. You create a feature and then you have to submit it for a review before it gets approved. Okay, so you create some code which is part of an application, and then you give it to someone else, to another developer. That developer checks it, and then it's gonna say, hey, it's okay, or change this, change the functionality, change the namings to make your application easier to read or your code easier to read. But before you even do that, you have to do it yourself, because as I said, your colleagues will hate you and you don't want that. Okay, so let's have a look. This one could be a camel case straight away. Item pending. Okay, check me. I don't know what it means. Maybe it means, let's see, I don't even see it here. I don't think he's even using it. So again, code that's not being used has to be deleted. Input is fine. Add item, probably it's referring to this, so this could be called add item button. Okay, some spacing in between this. You can remove this here. So this could be add button, add event listener click. So you see it already starts to read easier, okay, compared with what is it? Add, oh, sorry, add. So this should be add button. So what is add item? You see how confusing bad code can be? And that's why you need a code review all the time. He's not even using this. Okay, if you leave like variables in your code that have no purpose, you're gonna create like really messy code. So never ever leave unused code. So this should be add button. Okay, so now add button, add event listener click. So whenever we click on the add button, we get A. Why A? Why not name this value? And this can also be value. Okay. Now another thing here, this is a let, but we are not reassigning the value. So let's change it to a const. Okay. If we use let instead of const, we are pretty much giving a signal to another developer, telling the developer, hey, we might reassign this variable somewhere. But if we do not do it, we are giving the other developer the wrong signal. Even though you might be coding by yourself right now, at some point you will be working in a team. And if you develop these bad habits with the way you're writing your code, your developer friends will not like you that much. So keep in mind this, the stuff that I'm showing here. This is not a comprehensive list, it's just I'm going through this code, this specific code, and I'm fixing the problems in this specific code, okay? Same with this one, const. Jesus, this is a new keyboard. This to-do object should be with an O here, but you don't need to say to-do object if it's an object, because we already know it's an object, so we can just skip that object entirely. Okay, and now we can put a to-do in there. Again, this code is not done. This is like midway, but I'm just going through this code just for you to have an idea of how things work. Anyway, you could be changing a bunch of things, like for example button delete. Okay, it should be with capital D. I mean, when you create it or whatever, it should be with capital D. Same here, button completed, capital C. This process is a bit boring, but it's gonna pay dividends if you do it right and if you do it all the time. You'll just get better, okay? You'll just get better writing code. And if I can say something, if you teach yourself to write clean code all the time, and if you put yourself in the shoes of another developer that's gonna read your code, you'll be able to create extremely complex applications. You do not want complex code, you want simple code for creating complex applications, okay? Because your biggest bottleneck will be the type of code you're writing. If you write bad code, you'll create a bunch of bugs, and those bugs will prevent you from creating complex things, because you have one bug here, one bug there, and you're like, fuck, you're chasing bugs to fix here and there, you're stitching them together, and you just want to give up, and then you go back into tutorial mode and all that stuff, and you don't want to do that. Anyway, this is done for now. Let's go into the next part of the video.
The next thing is, do not repeat yourself. Do not repeat yourself. Dry. That's another like software development principle. When you write your code, you might be thinking, hey, I'm not repeating myself, but I'm sure that if you like take a step back, and then let's say you have like 4 buttons that do different things. Let's say you have a calculator. You have 4 buttons, and then for each button you are creating an event listener that does something. For one is like adding numbers, another one is like taking out numbers, I forgot the name of it. Then you have multiplication and then division, right? And you have like 4 different buttons, and you are thinking, hey, these 4 buttons are doing different things. But if you think about it, you could create just one function that does all those things for you.
Okay, now I want to show you an example of do not repeat yourself, okay? So here we have a simple calculator. You add a few numbers here, then you click plus, minus, multiply, divide, whatever, and you get the result, okay? Now let's have a look. We have add button, subtract button, multiply button, division button, okay? 4 times. We are repeating ourselves 4 times. This is like one of the most obvious places that I've seen people repeating themselves without even realizing, okay? So let's just look at the add button and subtract button, because they are similar. They are all similar, but these 2 are here, so
we're just gonna keep them as examples, okay? So let's have a look. This line, it's almost the same as this line. This is the same as the other one. This is the same as the other one. And this is the same as the other one. So then we can conclude that we can create a function okay, function calculate, and we can just literally copy this thing in. Boom. And now the only thing that's different is this calculation, okay? So let's see how we can replicate that. We know that we get an event, and then we can create calculation, a variable calculation, and then we can use a switch statement, which is gonna switch based on e.target.inner text. Okay, so based on the text that we have inside this button. So if the case is let's put all the cases. Okay, these are all the cases. So then if the case is addition, we are going to do this. If the case is subtraction, we're gonna do this. If the case is multiplication, we're gonna do this. And if the case is division, we are going to do this. That's it. Okay, let's format this really quick. So now we have this function that covers all our bases. If we can move it over here. And now we just need to call calculate every single time we click on a button. Okay, so here, here, sorry, I'm really bad with these new tools, here, and then over here. Okay, so now we are not repeating ourselves. Can you see how great this is? Like, if you learn how to do this, you'll become a total savage. You know, that's like a given. Because this is what you have to do anyway in your job. And if you teach yourself how to do this before you even get that job, you will be like a rocket, you know. And again, I'm doing this with my clients all the time, because that's the only way to improve, in my opinion, by getting feedback and support while you're coding as well. The roadmaps are fine on the internet, but you need this kind of feedback so you can improve fast. Okay, anyway, let's continue with the rest of the video.
Probably the worst thing that you could do is to watch tutorials all day. Like the first month, yeah, watch a bunch of tutorials just to have a feel for it, but then everything after those, like after that first month, it's not gonna help you in any way, shape or form, okay? You need to get out there and build stuff. When I started applying for jobs, when I was in your situation years ago, I somehow managed to get an interview with a recruiter. I think I said this story before. I took a day off from work. I cycled all the way from like Thornton Heath, if you're in London, you know where that is, all the way into the city of London. It took me like 1 hour and a half, I think. I went there, I went to the recruiters. The recruiter liked my energy, right? They liked how excited I was to become a developer, that I wanted to change my life. I wanted to, you know, create stuff. They saw the passion that I had in my heart, I guess. And then they asked me like, okay, but show us something, show us something. And then I realized I was just talking trash. And then I got super pissed and I started making stuff. Even though like the stuff that I was making wasn't like amazing, at least I was doing stuff. At least I was trying. And then with trial and error, I had a bunch of mistakes. all the stuff that I mentioned before. It took me ages to understand Redux. It took me ages to understand props and prop drilling, for example. It took me ages to do all those. It took me ages to like create a landing page for my portfolio application. It took me, I think, 1 month I worked on it, but I've learned animations. I've learned like a bunch of, I used a bunch of like React packages that were making like my stuff cool. I've learned a bunch of things. I didn't use most of the things that I've learned while making that app, but I stuck with one application and I kept building that stuff. You know, like most of you, and I've made a video before this video, they said you should work on an app for 6 months. I worked on that app for I think 2-3 months. I didn't have someone to tell me what to build, so I just built stuff out of my own like imagination, you know. I worked on that thing for a very, very long time. That's one of the biggest problems that you will have while learning JavaScript and React. You are not working on one thing for a long time. Work on something for a long time and you'll become successful. If I'll give you an analogy, because I really need to drill this down into you. If you change your workout every week, like what kind of progress will you have? You're gonna stick to the same regimen for 3 months, then you're gonna take a week off, then you're gonna go back to the same thing that you were doing. That's how you actually get better in the gym. And to get better at code and getting hired and making 6 figures working remotely, these things happen because you have a skill set, keep adding at it, keep fixing it every single day. I think Bruce Lee said this, not Bruce Willis. I do not fear the man who threw 1,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who threw 1 kick 1,000 times or something along the way. Like mastery comes from repetition, okay? Mastery comes from repetition. Doesn't come from like doing random things every day. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.